Cart.com, one of the leading e-commerce fulfillment companies. Again, I was saying not a lot of people wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm just going to go take on Amazon and then actually proceed to do it really well, especially not a lot of folks that maybe look like you and me in the room as immigrants and founders. And from zero to $300 million in annual revenue, 6,000 plus brands, maybe close to 2,000 team members. It's a phenomenal story of, a lot amazing personal journey, which Omair will really go deep into. I personally am a huge fan of, how he's built the company, and there's many interesting aspects on, acquisitions and, kind of crazy growth at all costs. So over to you, Omair. Thanks again for coming. And then, I'd love to hear your story, and we leave about hopefully 5 minutes for some questions at the end as well.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. So great to see everyone here, and I'll apologize in advance because if you hear me mumble or you don't fully understand what I'm saying, you have to remember I'm an entrepreneur and a Pakistani one too. So I have to pretend to be smarter than I actually am. And when I'm not winning, I start mumbling. So just bear with me when I share my story with you guys. But look, I wanted to take an opportunity to just kind of share my background and my story here, because there's just listening to the previous panel for a little bit, there's so much talent and potential in Pakistan. I'm from Karachi. I was born there, and hopefully what my story can do is maybe spark some innovation or motivation for someone to do something entrepreneurial, because I do believe that I think the only way we put ourselves as Pakistanis, as immigrants, on the map is by creating tremendous amounts of value. And it is not easy to create tremendous amounts of value. However, the good news is that I think we're born and raised to know how to do it. We just need to put the pieces together. And that's basically the intent of the conversation today. So I'll maybe start off a little bit with telling you guys a little bit about Cart.com, my company that I founded about 3.5 years ago. It's going to be about 4 years in November, so we're a relatively young company. But we're actually now at a 500 million revenue run rate as a company. We're already crossing 400 million as we speak. We're profitable. We've raised almost $500 million in equity and debt capital. That was only cool in 2021. So I talk about that last, and first about the fact that we have real revenue and profitability as a company. Our last round, which was done in 2023, which was a terrible market, as you guys may know. I think we were one of the 3 companies at a global scale, or one of 5, that raised an up round in a down market with no structure. So that was very, very good for us to see that in spite of the doom and gloom, when you build something of real value, then investors see it. Prior to Cart.com, I was a co-founder, not the founder, not the CEO of a company called Blinds.com, where we had built an e-commerce company to about 400 million in revenues. And we sold the company to Home Depot back in 2014. I was the sell-side CFO and COO. Exited the company in January 2014 on the 26th at 11:36 a.m. You remember those moments in your life, right? And that was a lot of fun doing over a course of 7 or 8 years. And then prior to that, I had actually moved to Houston at 16, and my father came here on an H-1B visa, so he dragged us along. Grew up in Sharjah, after about, I think I was 3 months old when I was born in Karachi, when we moved to the UAE, because that's what people do in Pakistan, they move out of it to make money. So I grew up in the late 80s and 90s in Dubai that did not look like what Dubai looks like today. And I'm sharing all of this because I think the 4 things I'm going to talk about, which I really believe immigrant entrepreneurs have a superpower on, are that, 1, we have a diversity of experience in our lives that most people don't have. We've grown up in different continents and countries, and social classes and religions and cultures and uncles and aunties and cousins and all kinds of things that are very core to our culture. And we've lived in so many places. We've learned how tough it is when you're back home in some of these places, when you don't have, a backing and a trust fund behind you, and all the stuff that people have that are doing really well. So I'm going to talk about the diversity of experience that helped me build Card. I'm going to talk about adversity, which I think a lot of immigrants kind of go through, whether in Pakistan or when they move here, specific adversity that I went through. And then, the tenacity that's needed to actually take the hardship of, the diversity and the adversity combined and actually not give up. And then the fourth stage, which is what I call, the last 80 of my 4 80s, which is creativity, which is where you take your diversity of experiences, you take your adversity that you've experienced in your life, you put together your tenacity and not gonna give up attitude, and then build something of value. And I really, when people talk to me now, they're like, oh, you built Cart.com, $1 billion company, overnight success. I'm like, you have no idea. There's no such thing as overnight success, and I've been training for it probably ever since I was 5 years old. Growing up in Dubai, it was an interesting environment, and I don't know how many of you have been there, but you've got the haves and the have-nots very clearly defined. And back in the late 80s and 90s, most of the Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi immigrants that were there were there for the building of the buildings, right? They were part of the labor class. My father actually worked as a travel agent there, but didn't matter because we were still brown and had a Pakistani passport. So, it was very interesting growing up in that society where you could see how, the world was when you had different skin and when you had different nationality versus what we were growing up as, right? And, while we weren't poor in Dubai, I mean, very, very grateful, lots of gratitude for that, but we weren't well-to-do and, family barely made it. But growing up in that multicultural environment, it was really interesting because it was sort of like drilled into my head that I didn't want to be poor. Because, I saw what rich people were and what poor people were, and I mean, it was just kind of better to be rich, at least for a 6, 7, 8-year-old who was just comparing, my toys versus the toys of the other kids playing around me. And it's really interesting. It sounds very superficial or materialistic, but growing up in my single digits, all I thought about was, how do I make money? And everybody in my family was like, wanting to be a doctor, an engineer, or finance accountant or whatever. I just wanted to be an entrepreneur, aka loser, to my extended family. But that's what I kind of grew up in, because I kind of did the math at a very early age when I realized that my dad had been working for other people for a very long period of time, and there was no way that by working for someone I could change what I had. So, unfortunately, there's nothing inspiring about how I started. It was purely based on I wanted to be richer than I was when I was growing up. During this time, Dubai was going through this really crazy time where they were not very kind to immigrants, especially Pakistani ones, and my father finally gave up and said, I'm going to have to go try another country, and thankfully he had the opportunity to come to the US, so he moved to New York. My family, my mom, my brother, my sister, we went to Pakistan because that's where you got to go when your father's on in Dubai. You can't stay there. So we went to Karachi when I was 15, and we were supposed to get our visas pretty quickly, but then 9/11 happened. And, the embassy closed down, and I kind of joyously, enjoyed the moment that I was there. I love being in Pakistan, by the way, because all my cousins and cricket and everything I knew was there, right? So I was like, well, I'm going to stay here for another year. Like, who cares, right? So while I'm there, I'm, doing a lot of things, made a lot of friends. I actually met my wife when I was 15. She was 15 too, by the way, and there's nothing illegal going on there. And we ended up getting engaged, and I brought her here later on. But when I was there, I went through a crazy experience in life. Now, I had experienced a lot of diversity and a lot of hunger to do something, but it was all very immature and novice because, I was still 15, still kind of didn't really understand what life actually meant, right? But one night in Karachi, I was out and about and with one of my friends, and we get kidnapped on gunpoint. I'm sure 80% of you have probably experienced some form of kidnapping in Pakistan, so maybe this is not as dramatic, but for me it was because, while I spent a lot of summers in Pakistan, I hadn't lived in Pakistan, right? I was there only for a couple of months in the past, and now I was there for a year, and 6 months into my journey of a year, I get kidnapped by two guys, and anyways, they drive around and they rob a bunch of stores while we're still in the car, keep us on gunpoint, and then one of the stores they were robbing actually ends up having a shotgun, which is so bizarre. Like, I don't know, people in Pakistan have guns, like, it's not Texas. Anyways, there's a shootout. One of the guys, the kidnappers, gets shot, comes back to the car. Now the two of them are talking about how there was a shootout, on how they may have killed someone, and how they needed to get rid of us because we know who they were, because this was no longer a robbery, this was a pretty serious thing. So they take us to this little abandoned area. Remember, I'm 15 and a half years old, right? And have not lived in Pakistan, so I'm one of those burglar boys and going through all of this shit, right? And they take us to this abandoned area. They asked us to come out. I get out, asked us to kneel down. And I'm like, trying to find out. I'm like, dude, just take my money, take my car. Plus my fellow, like, what do you want? And he's like, no, we have to kill you because you've seen us. So he puts a gun to my head. And I'm pretty sure that gun was made in some part of Pakistan because it didn't work. He shot me 7 times on my head, but nothing happened. He kept loading the gun and pressing the trigger, and it was a 30-second ordeal, which felt like a 2-hour ordeal when that was happening. But as a 15-year-old, right, it's really interesting because in that moment of time, my entire past and my entire future kind of came in front of me. And I was like, shit, man, like, I'm 15 and a half. I found this cute girl in this academy that I'm going to that I wanted to marry, and I wanted to be rich. Like, shit, man, I'm going to die poor. Like, like all of the aspirations I had and wanted to do this, that, or the other are going to be gone because this idiot, just decides to kill me. And it wasn't my day to die, and I didn't, hence I'm here, obviously. But he tried it 6 or 7 times, didn't work. Then they started talking amongst themselves, and I think one of them was thankfully smart enough to say, if we kill them with rocks, it's gonna get messy. So you're hearing this conversation, right? I'm like, man, this is getting better and better, right? Anyway, so they leave us, right? And we survive. My friend and I, we survive, and after that, we kind of go back to our families and file a police report and all that. But in that adversity, you kind of realize the most important thing in life, which is your life itself, right? And it gives you a level of purpose and motivation that, again, like people growing up in California, I don't think they're gonna have the chance to experience that, right? So when I moved here, I landed in the US, and my first thing was, I'm like, where do I start? And from that moment of experiencing diversity of different experiences in different countries and cultures and religions, to experience an extreme case of adversity, and then having the tenacity to land in the US and saying, I'm not going to give up and I'm going to build something out of it because I've been given another chance in life. I went literally apeshit from the time I landed in this country. I was 16 years old, and I said, I want a job, and I want to work 24/7. I did everything from cleaning bathrooms to delivering pizzas to, washing parking lots. Literally, by the way, like, we're, immigrants, so we kind of take whatever was given to us, right? Because they're still trying to figure out your green card and shit. So started my career that way, and as I'm going through these odd jobs, I realized that there's something really interesting about this country, which is if you go to someone and you tell them you have an idea, they give you money. And so I'm like 17 years old, and I'm like, I need to tap into that scheme. I need to go get that money so I can start a business, because that's what I wanted to do all my life growing up. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Now I'm in the greatest country in the world where I can go tell someone about an idea and they'll supposedly give me some money. So I pitched a bunch of people on this idea to sell jewelry that I would buy from Pakistan and sell on the weekends at the flea market in Houston. And I went to a lot of people, asked for $1,000. Nobody gave me $1,000. That's where I learned how to structure my round. Because I instead then went to 10 people and asked for $100 each. And I did it as a convertible note, which is I would give you your money back essentially. Obviously didn't call it that at that time. So thankfully 10 people trusted me with $100 each, and I raised that $1,000, and I opened up a little flea market store and started selling jewelry. And around this time I had actually, grown up a little bit. I was 18 and had gotten married. I was like, man, I'm here, poor, miserable. I should get my wife here so we can both be poor and miserable, which was a great idea. So her and I, on the weekends, we would study from Monday to Friday in college, and then on the weekends we would go sell jewelry at the flea markets. And we built almost a $700,000 a year business in 3 years across multiple locations in Houston. We were the flea market kings. I still remember my father walking in one day into the flea market to pick me up. And I was walking around with a yellow sign around my neck, which said, buy one, get one free, because I was trying to pull people in. And I remember the look on his face, because he was like, it was basically like, what the hell happened to you, right? So he's like, you went to school, and we're supposed to be really good at math and all this stuff. Like, what are you doing to your life here, right? And I said, Dad, I made $600 today. Like, who is gonna give you $600 in a day, right? And it was really interesting because the way I looked at life was very different than most people did. And I think the reason for that was where the creativity part comes in. I think a lot of times immigrants and entrepreneurs from our part of the world, they experience the diversity, they experience the adversity, and they sure as shit have the tenacity, right? Because what else are they gonna do? But they fail to connect those three things to the fourth part, which is the creativity part. If you really do some research on creativity, and there's actually a lot of research being done here at Stanford about it, creativity is not about idea generation. It's about connecting the dots based on your own experience. Literally, that's how anything is built. And I think I was very lucky in the sense that adversity experience I had had in my life was so bad that I was like, man, I have to be creative with life, because you're not going to get a second chance at it, right? And I think what was really fascinating when I started my flea market business and sold it, or when I was a co-founder at blinds.com, or when I started cart.com, you go through building a company, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are entrepreneurs here, so we know what I'm talking about, that how painful it is, how hard it is to build a company, how many times you can almost die. 2023, cart.com, even though we were 300 million, 200 million in revenue, we almost died because we had taken a bunch of debt and thought the equity markets are never going to change, but they changed, right? And our investors were not okay with us taking structured rounds, and they would rather something go to zero versus get a lower valuation, which, for the investors out here. So we almost died. But going through all of those experiences, it was like so easy, because it was like, how much harder can it be than almost getting shot in the head? And I think that perspective is virtually non-existent in everybody that grows up and going to private school with trust fund money, goes to Stanford or Harvard or Wharton, has family with connections and networks and all the things we complain about that we don't have. And I think we're thinking about it the wrong way, because I really think that what's needed to build a business is not, yes, you can raise a seed round at $100 million capital, evaluation, with your Stanford degree. But to build a real company, you need those four things. And, as Pakistanis and as entrepreneurs and as immigrants to this country where, there is this scheme of being able to talk to someone and take some money from them, we should be tapping into what's available to us. And, while who knows what will ultimately happen with Cart.com, we're still a 4-year-old company and there's a long way for us to go. What I can say, right, is that I'm very blessed to have connected those 4 things together. And I really hope that others are able to as well, because I think now more than ever before, Muslims and Pakistanis and immigrants and, we all need more wins. And that's why I care. So that's it.
Thank you. As promised, it was supposed to be an exciting ride. So again, I've heard the story even once before, but every time it gives me goosebumps, frankly, and that's really amazing. We do have a few minutes for questions. If somebody has any, quick questions there on anything that I already talked about, just raise your hand. We can kind of take it from there. I can actually start. I appreciate the honesty. And you're like, I just want to make more money. We're in Silicon Valley and even the US. It's all like, I want to have impact and this and that. I get it. But at some point in time, you did that. You did a lot of that, even with Lines.com. But as you just said, I get that it's still easier compared to your 7 times getting shot. It's not easy. Like, what keeps you going?
Yeah. And look, again, just excuse me for my candor, but I think purpose, impact, leaving a legacy are all things that happen once you've made money. It's really hard to think that way, and I have so much respect for people that think that way when they don't have money. For me, it wasn't the case. I will say that now, what I'm building is really entirely for a legacy. When I had my first exit at 29, I retired for 3.5 days, and then I was like, it took me back to the time when I was almost getting shot, and the thing that kept coming to my mind was like, man, nobody's gonna remember me. And so now, what I'm building is hopefully to leave a legacy for my family and for people, and hopefully, in all honesty, the biggest reason that I'm continuing to do what I'm doing is so that other Pakistani, other immigrants can see this as possible. There have been days where I'm like, man, I should have been on a beach, like just hanging out with my family and like digging a sandcastle. Why am I here, right? But it keeps me going because I'm like, if I give up, then there's nothing enough materiality that I've created that inspires people. So now I'm doing things for impact. I'm investing in Pakistan. I'm investing here in the U.S. I predominantly invest in Pakistani entrepreneurs. That's pretty much it. My purpose now is just leave a legacy behind. That's what keeps me going.
I think personally attest it has had a big impact on me because for me personally, it's not just building this big company, but also doing it in a way that's so unique. Now we know it exists because you've done it. But really kind of going, that's enough for another day. And we would love to have you again at some of these events. And is not just going up arguably against Amazon, but doing it in a way that's completely uncharted from at least my research. This better. But again, any questions here? Go ahead.
Yeah, what's your biggest challenge running on Cart.com?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we have almost 1,700 employees now, and it's really hard to be a 3.5-year-old company with 1,600 employees that are not in the same location. So, my biggest challenge right now is, again, once we made money, now I can think about all the other cool shit, which is culture and how we're keeping people motivated. The first 2.5 years, I was just like, get shit done, like, screw culture, like, just, we gotta make money, right? But now I think we're at a stage where I have to ensure that the company gets to $1 billion in revenue and $10 billion in revenue with scalable, repeatable processes. And, a culture that people want to be associated with, right? Like I can, my son, he's 13 now, he just turned into a teenager and, surprise, surprise, he wants to be an entrepreneur. And, I would love for him to at some point in time come work in my company, and I want this place to be a really good place for him to work. So having a good culture when you've gone from 0 to 500 million in revenues and 0 to 1,600 employees, that's really tough to do. And you know, they don't teach you that shit in school, man. Like, they really don't. Like, actually, half the things you have to do as an entrepreneur, nobody teaches you about them. You just have to do them, right? So that's the hardest part right now.
All right, thank you so much again, Omair, coming out here all the way, sharing the story. Again, big round of applause for incredible. Thank you.